Well, Razorback fans, it is that time of the week as Arkansas prepares for Mississippi State and the Bulldogs down there in Starkville. I'm going to tell you why I hate the Mississippi State Bulldogs.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Neighbors. I'm also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hope everybody's having a wonderful Thursday. We're getting closer to game time. And actually, it's going to be a great weekend, as I guess on tomorrow's podcast, we'll talk a little basketball too, with Arkansas and Kansas tipping off in an exhibition game that should be a lot of fun to break down and to discuss. So a lot of good stuff going on there, and it should be a great weekend. But you know, it's that time for this podcast to talk about why I hate a particular team that Arkansas is going to be facing. So for those of you who are Mississippi State fans who are witnessing this for the first time, don't take it personally. Don't get your panties in a twist. I do this for every SEC team that Arkansas faces because I hate everybody, because that's how Razorback fans are. They pretty much hate everybody. And I'll admit, Mississippi State is a unique one as to why I hate them. And I went through kind of my own personal history of games against Mississippi State, and I was really hard-pressed to find a game that made me mad. There was games I felt like Arkansas should have won that they didn't, or Arkansas was close in games, or maybe Mississippi State did annoying things, or maybe there was a certain player I wasn't too fond of, but nothing too serious, nothing too crazy as to why I would have a personal vendetta against Mississippi State, at least not in the football side of things. I didn't really care for their fans in baseball very often, but then again, that's every team in SEC baseball. So I was going through it, and here's the thing. I didn't have to go far. I already knew the main reason I hated Mississippi State, but I was trying to find something else that could make sense or that I could really talk about a little bit more in depth, but I couldn't. So there's not going to be a whole lot of reasons, and maybe some of you Razorback fans out there have some other reasons, but there's really one thing for me as to why I hate Mississippi State. Cowbells. I don't think it's a cool tradition or a cool thing. It is unique, but because it's not my team, I look at it as, okay, how come no one else can do that? You're not allowed to have artificial noisemakers in other venues. But why is Mississippi State allowed? Because it's really annoying. It's not like the cowbell is a pleasant thing to listen to. Like, at least with crowd noise, just regular crowd noise, that's something that everybody does, and you can kind of get used to it. Well, the A&M fans, they do some weird pitch of the crowd noise. I don't know. We've already talked about them, though. But Mississippi State just has cowbells where they can ring them until the player, I guess the quarterback gets set and the offense gets set to snap the ball. Then they have to stop. So I had to look it up. And this is according to SI.com, because the article is simply posed as to why are Mississippi State fans allowed to use cowbells, which is my question exactly. It says a clause in the SEC rulebook allows Mississippi State fans to bring them into the game and use them at certain points in the game. Artificial crowd noise is allowed in football stadiums by the NCAA. It says artificial crowd noise by conference policy or mutual consent of the institutions is allowed. The noise level must be consistent throughout the game for both teams. However, current rules remain in effect dealing with bands, music, and other sounds. When the snap is imminent, the band and music must stop playing. As with all administrative rules, the referee may stop the game and direct game management to adjust. So, with that being said, the SEC has actually banned artificial noisemakers. As in the SEC bylaw 30.22.1.5e, artificial noisemakers shall not be brought into or used at any sports venue during games between member institutions. Each institution must have statements printed on tickets and notices to the effect that such noisemakers will not be prohibited inside its competition areas. So the NCAA says, hey, it's up to the conferences, up to the teams and whoever, But the SEC, the conference that Mississippi State is a member of, bans artificial noisemakers. So how is that possible? Well, in 2010, here's you go. It's apparently history. It says from 1930s through 1974, Mississippi State fans used cowbells at games. That was until 1974 when the conference banned all artificial noisemakers. Okay. So in 1974, we're talking about 50 years ago, they banned them. Then in 2010, the schools amended the rule. It's from Mississippi State Athletics. That spring of 2010, 12 schools, the 12 of the SEC schools agreed to a compromise on artificial noisemakers, acknowledging the role cowbells play in the history of Mississippi State University by amending the conference bylaw. In the fall of 2010, on a one-year trial with specified restrictions, cowbells were permitted into Davis-Wade Stadium for the first time in 36 years, and due to Mississippi State fans' notable adherence to the rules outlined by the league, cowbells have been allowed at Mississippi State home games with similar restrictions in place. As of now, the current amendment allows the use of institutionally controlled computerized sound systems, including music, institutionally controlled artificial noisemakers, and traditional institutional noisemakers at any time, except at the time that the offensive center is over the football until the play is whistled dead. Okay. So, according to this, the SEC, the 12 schools of the SEC back in 2010, agreed to amend the rule. So here's what I have to say to that, because some people are going to be like, well, it's teams like Arkansas and everybody else, they allowed it to happen. Okay, who had that decision? I didn't get a vote. Did y'all get a vote? Did you Razorback fans, you get a vote in this? I didn't get a vote. Did the coaches get a vote? Because I feel like if the coaches got a vote, they'd probably be like, no, we don't want artificial noisemakers in there. So who voted on that? Who got a choice to say? It says the 12 schools agreed to a compromise. Who got that vote? Was it the athletic directors? Because I got news for you. The athletic director, at least here at Arkansas, that was there in 2010, ain't here no more. And I'd be hard-pressed to think that almost all, if not all, SEC schools right now do not have the same athletic directors, or even the same presidents, or chancellors, or whoever. So who got that vote? I would like to throw it again to the mercy of the court of the SEC and say, let's have a new vote. Let's have a new vote on this. Because it is absurd. I don't care about history. History ended 50 years ago. And the fact that they went from 1974 to 2010, I guess without cowbells, and then suddenly in 2010 cowbells were allowed, absolutely not. That's not history. That's not tradition. If you haven't done something since 1974 or whatever it is, that you can't just bring it back and be like, well, it's our history and tradition. No, you can't. You can't do that. You can't just call it history. Well, historical purposes, we need it back. And people are going to come at me and be like, well, you said the same thing about the slobber hog at Arkansas. Okay, we're talking about a graphic on the court. Not something that has a direct impact in games and an artificial noise, but something that's banned from everybody else and from the conference around. But as long as you have a tradition, you can bring cowbells in. You know what I think? I think as Arkansas fans, what everybody needs to do is go to the SEC and be like, hey, it was our tradition back in the 60s of bringing in air horns. But you don't remember that. It wasn't on TV. You can't really hear it because there weren't a whole lot of games on TV back then. But we had air horns. That was our tradition, air horns. And we should be allowed to do that. I mean, why not? Because apparently Mississippi State can do it because they have cowbells. And here's another thing that I find amusing. They don't do this in any other sport. They don't do it in basketball. I don't even think they do it in baseball. And if they do, it's just a few of them. But I don't see hear a bunch of cowbells all over the place all the time like they do in football. So if you want to know why I hate Mississippi State, it's that reason why. Cowbells are dumb. It shouldn't be allowed. It's not allowed. But then the SEC said that it amended it in 2010 because of all the schools in the SEC agreeing. I did not get a vote. None of us got a vote. And I think that's crap. I'd like to know who was the representative from the University of Arkansas that said, yeah, let's give them cowbells. Nobody else can have those artificial noisemakers, but because Mississippi State and of a tradition back during the Carter administration or Ford or whoever it was, let's go ahead and do that. Let's make that possible. Let's make that happen. It's dumb. I don't really like watching their games on TV because of how noisy it is and how it's not a pleasant sound. Cowbells are not a pleasant sound. I know they're not supposed to be, but it's like even if you're just trying to watch the game on TV, you want to mute it. And the fact that there's like everyone thinks it's so cool and fun. It's not. It's lame and it's weak because you have such a small stadium and such a small fan base that you can't live up to the level of all the other SEC schools that have a major, massive stadium with a bunch of fans that don't need any artificial noisemakers, that you have to be able to, we need that because we can't be loud enough. I don't like it. I don't buy it. And it's dumb. That's why I hate you, Mississippi State. And I need to get with Greg Sankey on this. We need to place a new vote. We need to have a new election. It is election season after all. A new election on artificial noisemakers and banning them from the stadiums once again in the SEC. Make the SEC great again. All right, I'm done. I promise. But anyways, we will talk about some of those games, though, between Arkansas and Mississippi State and how crucial and memorable they've been under Sam Pittman. We'll talk about that here in a second. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, all you Razorback fans, I know that you're all about FanDuel right now because FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and you can win big with a big return on FanDuel because when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, as well as be on the same page with all of your bets. You'll also get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed whenever you place your first $5 bet. It's at FanDuel.com. The Razorbacks right now about 6.5-point favorites on the road against Mississippi State. If you're feeling good about that, if you're not feeling so good about it, get on it. Start betting with FanDuel.com. It's America's #1 sports book. That's FanDuel.com. All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. You know, this game against Mississippi State, as I mentioned in the previous segment, there hasn't been a whole lot of games that have really made me mad, you know? There have been those games that I just remember back, oh, man, I hated that guy or I hated that coach or I hated, whoever it was. It's kind of just been whatever. I mean, I'm not saying you've dominated this series, but you are 18-15 against them in the history. And, it's funny, the years of Chad Morris, was like the worst. For when you lost 52-6. I think Joe Moorhead put up like 108 points on you in 2 years, and then he got fired. So that doesn't say a whole lot, but who cares about the past? Let's talk about here under Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman went up against, of course, Mike Leach, rest in peace, who was the Mississippi State head coach, as well as going to be going up against Jeff Levy, who was the head coach. I guess it was Arnett last year and now Levy this year. So this is going to be the third different coach that Sam Pittman's faced since being at Mississippi State. Oh, since Mississippi State's been with Arkansas at the Sam Pittman era. You know what I'm saying. So Arkansas's 2-2. They won the first two, but they lost the last two. As ironic as it is, Sam Pittman and Arkansas were actually undefeated against Mike Leach, but or I guess 2-1 against Mike Leach, and then lost the game to Arnett. But you think about the history of this game in this era specifically. I'll take you back to October 3rd, my birthday, by the way, of 2020, which, at least in the time I've been alive, whenever Arkansas's played on my birthday, they're undefeated, for what it's worth. But anyways, that game was a memorable one because Arkansas did win 21-14. But it was memorable because it was the COVID season, and that was Sam Pittman's first win as a head coach at the University of Arkansas. And it was also Arkansas's first SEC win since 2017. It was a memorable one. It was on the road against Mississippi State. And for those who may not remember, that was coming off of a game where Mississippi State was ranked, I think, 16th. And everybody thought that they were going to be incredible because the week before they went up against LSU down in Baton Rouge and put up like 700 yards on LSU in that Bo Pelini defense, which was a joke. So everybody thought that, oh my goodness, this team again with Mississippi State, they're just next level good. There's not going to be a defense that can stop them. They're just putting up points. And as that LSU team's coming off of a national championship, man, this is going to be big. It's going to be tough. And so Arkansas was big, heavy underdogs in that one. And they went out there, and guess what? They won. The first SEC victory. It was officially the game where the turn that damn jukebox on came into fruition. It didn't have the gusto that Sam Pittman now has it with, but I wish I could play the video again, but if you watch it back, it's a very simple thing where he's just talking to him afterwards, saying how proud he is of him. He's like, do we believe? All right, hey, turn that damn jukebox on, because he wanted the music to play. So that's where it came from. But a very memorable game, and one that meant a lot, I know, to Sam Pittman, and meant a lot to this team, and really got Arkansas back out of the gutter that they were under the Chad Morris era and the end of the Brett Bielema era. So that was very significant. The 2021 game that was in Fayetteville was significant. I remember it was significant, at least for me, and this may be more of a personal thing, but that was a game where Arkansas, it was a great football game. Arkansas had a great season. They ended up going 9-4. And they were playing Mississippi State at home, to which it was kind of a back and forth game, but Mississippi State did take the lead late in the game. I think there's around 5 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. Arkansas had to have a touchdown. Had to have a touchdown in order to win. And no one had really seen Arkansas in those clutch situations drive down the field and make plays. They hadn't seen it, at least. Well, in that particular drive, they found a way. They made it work. You had KJ Jefferson, who played really well in that and had some really good throws. You had some really good play calls dialed up by Kendall Briles, whether you like him or not. You had that. You also had Dominic Johnson. A lot of people forget about him. That was a time where I thought he was the best running back on the team. Dominic Johnson get the touchdown, and Arkansas, I think, also went for a 2-point conversion and got it, and ended up winning by a final score of 31-28. Now, Mississippi State had a chance to tie the game at the end, which was a little bit alarming, but the kicker missed the field goal. I think they missed 3 field goals in that game, and by 2 different kickers, and that was when Mike Leach opened up a competition for a kicker there at the school. But it was one of the first times I remember seeing Arkansas actually put together a clutch performance down the stretch late. Now, the next year, and the next 2 aren't going to be great, but the next year you go down there to Starkville, and it was really I won't call it the beginning of the end, but I will say that it was a time where people were like, oh no, I don't know about this. Arkansas started off fairly strong in 2022. People forget about that. 2022 had some weird games, and it wasn't a great year. But they started off strong. They beat Cincinnati. That was when the schedule was the most absurd thing ever. They beat Cincinnati, who was just coming off of the playoff appearance there in Fayetteville. And the next week, they played South Carolina at home, a team that ended up going 8-4, and they beat the brakes off of them. I think they played Bobby Petrino's Missouri State team. Everybody remembers that. And how scary that was, but they did win. And then, of course, the famous Texas A&M game where literally they threw it away and just gave it to Texas A&M. And the Texas A&M game was when it was like, oh, geez, this might not be the thing. And then right after that is when they played Mississippi State. They didn't have KJ Jefferson. You had Cade Fortin start and didn't really look very good in the game. But then they put in Malik Hornsby, and that guy like ran all over me, actually threw for a ton of yardage. But it didn't matter. Arkansas just got destroyed. 40-17 in that game. Didn't even really look competitive. The defense, that was the first time the defense got really exposed of having their issues. And it was a significant game that year because, again, looking back on it, it was the start of something it was the first real hiccup and the first real problem in the Sam Pittman era where people were like, maybe this isn't the thing. Maybe this isn't the way that it's going to go. But, of course, we talked about Mike Leach passing away. Rest in peace. Very tragic. And then Arkansas plays Mississippi State last year with Arnett as the head coach in Fayetteville in a game that ends 7-3. I'm not going to get into that game, but you got to admit it is pretty memorable. It's something I'm going to tell my grandchildren about, that I witnessed a game in regulation in the SEC that ended with a final score in Fayetteville of 7-3. 7-3, and Arkansas won. That's all I'm going to say about that. So it's a very memorable game. Let's hope this weekend's a memorable one for the good reasons. Not for the bad, but for the good reasons. Let's hope that's the case. We'll talk about some of the Hogs that were in the NBA. and some basketball talks. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, folks, I got to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money on sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks is also the best way to get in on the action in sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay in place even if one of your players are injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup alive. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. Simple as that. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to payouts like Taco Tuesday, where each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select players' projections up to 25% to provide more value for your lineups. So download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 off after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today, use the code LOCKEDONCollege, and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And I can tell you this, it's a thing that you wanted to get in on. It's a lot of fun. You can compete against your friends, and it's all about downloading that app of Prize Picks. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I'm not going to go too deeply diving into the basketball side of things. I think we'll probably save that more so for tomorrow. But I did think it was a pretty cool thing where, basketball season's here. The NBA's officially started. And I know a lot of people don't care about the NBA. And I don't necessarily care about it either. Like I root for the Celtics and I root for former Razorbacks, but I don't really care about it this time of year. I do watch the NBA playoffs and finals. That's pretty entertaining, I would say. But other than that, nothing really. Well, either way, the Arkansas Razorbacks came out with this deal about, hey, the pro Hogs and who's in the pros and everything. And I saw that their release said that there were 11 Razorbacks on opening day rosters. And I was like, man, that seems like a lot. And then I went and I saw that in the country, as far as college teams go, Arkansas is tied for fifth with the most NBA players on a roster. Tied for 5th. And you know what they're tied with? Kansas and Gonzaga. Kansas and Arkansas have just as many pros on a roster in the NBA. That's wild. And they're second in the SEC, by the way, behind Kentucky. Kentucky leads the way, of course, with 29. Who was the coach that was there that got all those players? Oh, yeah, it's John Calipari, who's at Arkansas now. How about that? But when I saw the players, the 11 players that were there, I'll list them off for you. But you got Anthony Black at the Orlando Magic, Ricky Council IV at the 76ers. You got Daniel Gafford at the Mavericks, Isaiah Joe at the Thunder. You got Mason Jones on a 2-way contract with the Sacramento Kings, Moses Moody with the Golden State Warriors, Bobby Portis with the Milwaukee Bucks, Nick Smith Jr. with the Charlotte Hornets, Stanley Amude with the Milwaukee Bucks, also on a 2-way contract, Jordan Walsh with the Boston Celtics, and Jalen Williams with the Oklahoma City Thunder. So it's really cool to see that, and that's a very big deal, and that's just an awesome thing. But here's the deal. I want to give out a shout-out, and I'm not trying to start anything, and I'm not trying to make anyone feel a certain way, but shout out to Eric Musselman. I mean, of those 11 players, 9 of them are Eric Musselman coach players. The only one that weren't is Daniel Gafford and Bobby Portis. The rest of them are because of Eric Musselman. And you got to give credit where credit is due. And I don't see that changing anytime with John Calipari when it comes to getting players into the league and into the NBA. Don't see that happening as far as a change in the tide at all. But it is really cool because it shows just how good of basketball you were able to witness and how, yes, coaching matters. Yes, all that stuff matters for sure. But the best run that Arkansas had in a long time in basketball was the past 4 or 5 years. And the majority of the NBA players, it might be the most NBA players they've had in the league at once, but those guys, the vast majority of them came through that same stretch. So what does that tell you? You're successful when you have the Jimmies and Joes. You're successful when you're able to put out there players that are able to get to the next level and get to the NBA. It helps out your program. Not only when it comes to talent and winning, but in recruiting as well. So shout out to the Razorbacks. Shout out to the NBA players that are former Razorbacks, and wish them nothing but the best of luck this year. Still a pretty cool thing. Appreciate everybody listening in and watching into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Google Play. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Neighbors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have, and we'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you then.